Hello and welcome to another episode of Sports and Songs podcast. Today we've got a bonus episode, the NFL Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. Hi, my name is Dan. On my recent trip to the Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio, I took photos of maybe 30 things there that I thought were interesting to me. You may find the same. If you've been there, these may not be interesting. If you have never been there, very interesting place to go. Keep in mind, next week, a week from tonight, is the annual Hall of Fame football game. The Bears will be playing the Houston Texans. So that game will be played there on site at Tom Benson Field. Now, the museum itself is what I'll be showing you some slides today of some things that I thought were interesting nonetheless, and particular of note to myself. Let's get started here. First thing off the bat, I love the display of the first ever invention of the pylon, the NFL football end zone pylon. And that was invented by a local man years ago in Canton, Ohio. Actually has the patent on that. I find that interesting. Thought listeners would like that as well. There's the pylon invented by a man in Canton, Ohio. Here's the football helmet that will be used for the Houston Texans for the game next Thursday. Now, this is not their home or their away, but this is, I believe, it's their alternate. There's the look of the jerseys they'll wear on the Thursday night game for the Hall of Fame game. There's always a game that accompanies the weekend's festivities, the enshrinement. There's a parade in town. Basically, the town shuts down in Canton, a small little town in Ohio. Everything takes part there. I thought the helmet here was interesting. This is their alternate helmet for the Texans. I've never seen that before. Now we get into some of the jerseys that are on display. There's an old Urlacher jersey on display along with a J.J. Watt game-worn helmet. The old Bob Greasy, quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. The specs, so the glasses that he wore later in his years. He wore these while playing football, the quarterback for the Dolphins. Bob Greasy's glasses are on display at the. That was interesting as well. Here's a helmet. Chris Doman, game-worn helmet. The old Minnesota Vikings defensive lineman. Chris Doman. Another thing was interesting here as I took some of these photos is they talked about the football stadiums, the various stadiums. Years ago, they played in converted baseball fields, football, soccer. Everything was kind of converted to get all the sports in on one field. The Dallas Cowboys, when they opened this in 1971, was the first ever football-only stadium. I guess I didn't know that. In the mid-'90s, I had a tour of the stadium, was able to go down there onto the field and walk on that very star at the midfield as the group tour. That was part of the group tour. But that artificial turf there, 1971 for the Cowboys, was the first football-only stadium. They've now moved on to the much bigger stadium there in Texas to play. But that was the first one of its kind back in the day. Here's a certificate, a franchise certificate. And this one is, if you can read in the small print there, the Philadelphia Football Club. This was the Philadelphia Eagles' original certificate on display that made them a football team, their franchise in the NFL. So they've got various artifacts like this on display in the museum. Now, if I would have taken photos of everything here, it would have been many hours. So many things here to see, so many things on display. I just took some things that were pretty interesting to me. When you get inducted to the Hall of Fame, you do get the gold jacket. The gold jacket. There's a picture there of what those look like on display. This coming year, there will be 7 players enshrined into the Hall of Fame, and they'll be inducted into the 2024 Hall of Fame year. So 7 of these will be given out to the jackets. Very exclusive club. Another thing was interesting. Recently, the UFL, United Football League, held their championship game. There's the game-worn jersey of Martinez, the quarterback for the Birmingham Stallions. They didn't have much on display other than NFL stuff, but with the recent merger of the XFL and the USFL, they have a small segment of artifacts here from the UFL, just brand new this year, 2024. There's a game ball from the championship game that Birmingham won just last month. The NFL draft. I know a lot of people watch the draft or listen to it or watch it on TV. These are the cards on display, the cards from the very last draft, the cards that are handed to the commissioner when they get up in front of the microphone to announce the pick. This is what the cards look like. The team will fill out the first and last name, the position of the player drafted, and the college that they're from, and turn these in. The commissioner then will read this out and introduce the player for the draft. Here's a collection of this last year's draft from April 2024. You can zoom in there and see the number of picks there on display. During the COVID year, there's a display of, in this particular case, Rob Gronkowski, his tag that he had to wear, his lanyard around his neck that showed him his contact tracker, how many people he came in close contact with during COVID. So there's a display of this. During that year, when they had to stay away from people and do smaller group meetings and things like that, they couldn't be in close contact within 6 feet. And there's the actual Gronk's lanyard that he wore during the COVID pandemic, called the contact tracker. Very interesting things here on display at the museum. There's also a video session with 3 different players that talk. Curtis Martin from the Jets talks about his upbringing, growing up in a bad, negative neighborhood, where it showed his rise to fame. He spoke about that he thought he was either going to end up dead or play NFL football. His dream come true to play. Steve Largent was another one that talked, former receiver for the Seahawks, talked about being undersized and being cut by multiple teams, and no one ever thought there would be a chance for him to play college, much less pros. He's in the Hall of Fame, Steve Largent. Now, the middle jersey is an Alan Page High School jersey. Alan Page went on to get into the Hall of Fame as a Minnesota Viking, but this is his high school, a Catholic high school in Canton, Ohio. Yes, right where the Hall of Fame is the high school that Alan Page went to. He was number 79 for the Crusaders, went on to make the Hall of Fame. There's a story on him in there as well. Now, Alan Page grew up also to be a Supreme Court justice later on in life. So they talked about, it doesn't matter your background, where you come from, you can do great things. So there's Alan Page there in the center, along with Curtis Martin and Steve Largent. There's an image there of the actual Lombardi trophy, Super Bowl trophy on display there. That's for the Super Bowl champion, of course. Pat Mahomes, before the AFC Championship game, this was the gear that he wore when he walked onto the stadium before they got uniforms on prior to the game. His high tops that he wore, his sleeveless hooded sweatshirt with Len Dawson on it. And so he came out that game during his pregame warmups. This was on display at the Hall of Fame. The great Pat Mahomes from the Kansas City Chiefs. Walter Payton back in the day was, I get a kick out of this. He was always known for his kangaroo shoes, his turf shoes that he wore for the Chicago Bears. Turf shoes are on display here, this famous kangaroos. These are the shoes that he wore in 1984 when he broke the career record of Jim Brown. These turf shoes are on display. The great Walter Payton. Out on the entranceway before when you come into the Hall of Fame in Canton is this plaque on the ground made of stone. It's two sides. One is the Hall of Fame, and the other was the old original logo from way back when. Now, if you watch the enshrinement or the induction ceremonies, this is where the players will get up there and stand, and they will stand on this block. So for that enshrinement induction ceremony, the player will stand on one side, the person introducing them or inducting them or reading the speech will be on the other side. This is where the actual stand, the actual many people over the years have stood on this. It's on display on the actual floor there. When you go to the museum, you can actually stand on this. If you watch the induction ceremony, this is where they will be standing. I got a kick out of that, of course. When you go in, you do get the map. This is a very large building to go through the museum. They've expanded a couple times and have, due to growth, added a couple of extra locations and levels. There's one, two, I think 3 levels to go through. There's a whole map. It took me, I would say, 3 hours to go through this entire Hall of Fame museum. Do not try to attempt this on a 30-minute stop if you're driving through town, or an hour to get through it all. You need to take your time. There's lots to see, lots of things that aren't interest to you. Perhaps you can skip over and go on to things that are interesting to you. Of the average person, it does take 2 to 3 hours to get through this. They do a whole map when you open this up. The one I got when I went here last week was the image of the 7 inductees that will be going into the Hall of Fame next Saturday. Those are the 7 inductees that will be going in. They'll each have their own induction speech. And then, of course, the game itself is Thursday night. There's the ring. Kay Jewelers makes the ring for the Hall of Fame. So the inductees get their own ring to wear, much like a Super Bowl ring or a World Series ring. The Hall of Fame inductees will get a ring made by Kay Jewelers. This is different than the Super Bowl ring, which is made by the Minnesota Jostens company. I think the World Series rings, Super Bowl rings are made by Jostens. I've got a little bit of a Minnesota slant on this bonus episode today, being a Vikings fan. But Kay Jewelers does the Hall of Fame rings. They have them on display. Each inductee has the option of the size of their ring, the shape of the ring, and what kind of style the diamonds should be in. There's about 4 different options on the color, the style, the size, and the display. They get to pick how they want their ring to look. But Kay Jewelers does give them 4 options that the players get. So if you see a Hall of Famer with the ring on, they did decide how their customized ring looks. Now on to the busts. The busts in the Hall of Fame. Each inductee does get bust made of themselves. Typically, the artists that do these, I believe I was talking to a gentleman that was working there. There's basically one of 4 people or craftsmen that do these busts. You can also get someone, if you know someone or an artist that you know yourself, they may get the option to do the bust, but typically it's contracted out through a handful of local people. Here's a Mike Singletary bust. I recently got his autographed football last year. Wanted to get a photo of this, as I'm a Mike Singletary fan, the old Chicago Bears, Mike Singletary. So all these busts are made similar, but by different artists. Mick Tingelhoff, former Viking. There's the bust of Mick Tingelhoff. These are all on display. Anyone who's been in the Hall of Fame since the history of the NFL Hall of Fame has their busts on display there in the museum. Drew Pearson. I also have met him once and received his autograph. Thought that was interesting, so I took a picture of Drew Pearson himself, the old wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. Here's what the display room looks like of just the busts. Each year, that year, the inductees got in. They're all on display by year. You can go through and look at those in chronological order. Every single bust of every single Hall of Fame player goes in a big circle, wraps around. Some years have 3 or 4. Some years have, I think, up to 7 or 8 inductees each year. They're on the ballot and they get voted in. They can't become eligible until they've completed their 5th year after retirement. After retiring, there's a 5-year window, and then you become eligible to go into the hall. Here's the 2024. Like I said, 7 inductees will go in. Here's the shelves all preset, lit up, that are currently empty. After the enshrinement dedication ceremony, a week from Saturday, the busts will go on display and go into these shelves. 2024. Very interesting. This whole museum, if you're a football fan, there's an old Jack Youngblood game-worn jersey. The Rams, Jack Youngblood in the Hall of Fame. The teammate Jim Youngblood, common misconception, he was not related, was not a brother or a cousin to Jack Youngblood. But 2 Youngbloods were on the very same team for the Rams in the 70s and 80s. Jack and Jim. They had to have their name spelled out on top of the last name, Youngblood. One was Jack, one was Jim. Not related. Played on the same team in the same years. Very interesting. I thought I took note of that to get a photo of the ever popular Jack Youngblood. Marvin Harrison, his jersey and helmet are on display here too. So not only are the busts of the Hall of Fame inductees, there are displays of various people in uniforms that they wore, game-worn things that they put out on loan or gave to the Hall to have on display. Marvin Harrison, receiver for the Colts. Here's the late Pat Tillman, number 40 jersey for the Cardinals. The ever-popular Eric Dickerson, Rams number 29 jersey. Dickerson always played running back with the specs on underneath his helmet, his goggles, his specs. Those are on. Actual specs that he wore on display in the Hall of Fame. Pretty interesting. Jerry Rice, the actual gloves he used. Jerry Rice, the popular receiver for the San Francisco 49ers. There's his wide receiver gloves on display. Jerry Rice's helmet is also on display. One of the greatest receivers ever played the game, Jerry Rice. And there's also an image of what his locker would have looked like. A helmet, receiving gloves, the jersey, his pants, cleats, turf shoes. Jerry Rice's locker. They have an example of what that would have looked like back in the 80s. I'm a Steelers fan, so I thought I'd take some photos here of some Steelers memorabilia. A Terry Bradshaw game-worn helmet on display. A Terry Bradshaw game-worn jersey on display. And the 1972 turf from the Immaculate Reception. If you remember back to the playoff game in 1972, Franco Harris caught that ball that ricocheted off another player. He caught it and took it into the end zone for a score. The section of the field, they cut out an actual square of the field. They were getting new turf the next year. They were going to throw all this away at the end of the 72 season. They went to the spot where Franco Harris caught that ball and cut out a square and sent it to the Hall of Fame. You can actually see the artificial turf from the 1972 game where the Immaculate Reception took place on display. I always get a kick out of this stuff. Now, when you come into the Hall of Fame, the building looks like this. You've seen it many times before. door, I'm sure, but it's connected to the stadium. The Hall of Fame Stadium is next door. The Hall of Fame Museum are both right next to each other off of an interstate highway. And that's what it looks like there from a distance. The Tom Benson Field. Here's the stadium and the field. Small field. They do have the Hall of Fame game there every year. I think it holds 20,000 fans. In the past, they've had the XFL and I think the USFL playoffs or championship games held there at this field on site. This is the home of the local high school teams do play at this complex. There's a good shot of the field there too. Field goal posts up. I think the weekend when I was there, they had the chalk or the field printed for a flag football event. So real small field there if you look, set up for flag football. So that is not the correct dimensions of an actual NFL game, but they'll get those set for the game coming up on Thursday, a week from tonight, Thursday. And once again, this sells out. The city shuts down. It is for Canton, Ohio. This is basically the Kentucky Derby weekend. Everything that goes on, from the parade to the enshrinement to the induction to the service to the dinner to the football game. This is quite the spectacle. There's the field there too. The game is night. The lights are there for the night game each year at the stadium, Tom Benson Stadium. Every year the Hall of Fame game is held on this site. Now outside the hall, you'll come in and park. There's a helmet there when you come on site, letting the visitors know they're at the site of the Hall of Fame. Real neat place to go. Tickets are $45 to get in, unlimited for the day. Take as long as you need. Go in the morning, head back out for some lunch or dinner, and come back in again. Your ticket gets you back in for the entire day. Always wanted to go there. Glad I was able to see this. Here's the big sign you'll see from the freeway. And then as you get close as well to the site is an old statue of Marion Motley. Died in 1999, a big Ohio football player back in the day, many years. And there's a statue of him talking about him. The reason the Football Hall of Fame is in Canton, Ohio also is the early days of football. Pro football is where the teams got together and played before the NFL started. Teams that were in Akron, Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, Canton, Ohio, Youngstown, Ohio. The state of Ohio was the hotbed for football and pro football. So when they needed a place to do the Hall of Fame, of course the answer was in Ohio. They selected Canton. Once again, the inductees for next week's Hall of Fame. There's what it looks like when you come into the museum. And once again, the shot of the exterior. And the shot of the doors when you come on in. As well. Great experience. Good stuff. Very, very interesting to see how the museum and the artifacts that are there. Hopefully I was able to shed some facts and some light on some of the things that I personally thought were interesting in the Hall of Fame. Once again, my name is Dan. This is a bonus episode for Sports and Songs podcast, my trip to the NFL Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. Thanks for listening.